Welcome to the testimony and counterfeiting workshop that I'm going to be presenting today. My name is Dr. Caroline Francis, and before I get started, I am from Melbourne, so I would like to make an acknowledgement of country for Melbourne. RMIT University acknowledges the people of the Wurrung and Bunwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nations on whose unceded lands we conduct the business of the university. And RMIT is the university I'm from, respectfully acknowledges their ancestors and elders, past and present. And we acknowledge the traditional custodians of their ancestors of the lands and waters across Australia, where we conduct our business, which is wonderful. We can actually present with the University of Western Australia and the honeybee product CRC. So today, I'd like to introduce this particular anti-counterfeiting workshop that is actually relevant for all Australian exporters. And this particular research was developed through the University of Melbourne while I was doing a PhD there. And we were looking at, it was a collection of different types of experts coming to the field to do PhD research, to look at the supply chains for export for Australia, primarily to China, but it's very relevant for all different types of countries and export opportunities. So this workshop was birthed from that research. It's founded on peer-reviewed data, and it's actually really relevant for all types of companies, but especially this one has been tailored for the honeybee industry. Just an introduction to myself. So I'm currently the program manager at RMIT, managing the industrial design program. I originally have worked in over 20 years approximately in the fast moving consumer good industry and new product development space. I've opened a branch in Hong Kong for a design company called Infinity Design. I've worked at outer space as the studio manager, looking at different types of product development, but a lot of them were food packaging, and we won design awards for those. I then also was working in the Food Innovation Centre at Mondelez, Australia, at Ringwood. And I was the capability development manager there. And what we were doing there, which was really interesting, it was a centre of excellence, and we were looking to help small to medium enterprises learn from the experience of a big company such as Mondelez, but also give them access to lots of different types of innovative technologies and facilities. So we had 3D printers, 3D scanners, we had virtual theatres, we had augmented reality, we had lots of different types of fast prototyping equipment. So I was managing all the designers and making sure that whole business plan was sustainable, making sure that all the types of small to medium enterprises could leverage all the research and learnings that was on offer there. Then that gave me a real keen interest on what was the risks when Australian companies are exporting, and obviously Australian and New Zealand companies, was for the ANZ regions. And so I went ahead and joined the team with the ARC food value chain. So it was about a transformation research hub looking at the export of companies. And we were looking at the risks and looking at how we can actually mitigate those risks. And so I looked at anti-counterfeiting. I now am working at RMIT at university, as I've said previously, but also just to mention, I'm the lead chief investigator for the Fight Food Waste CRC. So I'm continuing that research in the safe food packaging area. So as you can understand, I'm really keen about Australian businesses, about maintaining the brand premium for Australia. I'm really interested in making sure we build trust with our consumers. And I do believe that perceptions drive social behavioural change. And we'll get into that in a moment. But what's really interesting is we need to build trust with our consumers. And a lot of that also is hand in hand with security technologies. So without further ado, I'm going to continue. Today, industrial design works a lot with the design process, and this whole workshop is leveraged on the design process. What is the design process? It's a step-by-step guide helping businesses and designers themselves to work through a design problem, to execute something to the end and produce something that is going to be viable for a design need or a design problem. So it is 5 steps. It starts with empathy, understanding the problem, understanding the stakeholders, understanding what is the activities that are happening in that design problem. We then step aside, and once we've gathered all that information and really gotten into the shoes of the problem, we then define the problem and state, this is what we're going to solve. Then we move on to ideate. We come up with ideas, and no idea is rubbish. We come up with lots of ideas, and then we collect what we can work with. And then we select from those ideas from ideate, and we move that into, okay, we're going to look at option A. This is the best option that we've come from ideate, and we're going to prototype it. We're going to create something from that, and then we're going to test it. And by testing it means that we need to make sure it's got its legs. It actually isn't something that's going to fall over before we roll it out into production or make it commercial. So this is not a linear process. Sometimes we have to go backwards and forwards, go back to the drawing board, as they say. And it's really important that this is more of a guideline to know that you are moving forward to an executable result. So today I will introduce the design process and all the things in relation to counterfeiting. And then tomorrow I will give you case studies, and we'll also have a lot more interaction tomorrow. And we'll look at different platforms such as Miro and Mentimeter, which I'll introduce tomorrow. So let's start. So in the empathy stage, I really want you to I want to walk you through a bit more of a background. This will be the crux of today. It will have a lot of research information, which I'll try and translate as much as possible so it's relevant and meaningful for you. But what's important is we spend time understanding the problem and understanding who we're dealing with. Because if we don't understand it, we don't take it seriously, and we don't invest in the solutions. So from the literature, it shows that counterfeiting is a big problem and it affects everybody, which is no surprise. However, they do target small to medium enterprises especially. Why? Because small to medium enterprises have less financial backing generally compared to multinationals, and they often invest in less technological resources because they just don't have the funds to do so. And what's really important is that we build trust with our consumers. But how do we build trust with a consumer group when we're exporting to a new group that doesn't know us yet? Well, we have to recognize that trust is based on familiarity cues. So what are familiarity cues, you say? Well, if I meet somebody, I often meet somebody and I first am coming from either a culture that I naturally trust or I don't naturally trust. And that's normally based on, have I been burnt before? Have I, like, you know, there's pre-experiences that I've learned. Do I trust people initially or not? When I meet someone, I'm looking for things that I can trust because I don't know them, and I'm starting to see whether they are trustworthy or not, and whether I'm going to invest in my trust in them. So before anyone gets to trust each other, there's no trust. And you have to establish trust, and that's called initial trust. And then it will move to a level of trust. But initial trust is what I'm going to be talking about today, because it's really important. Once you understand, you have to develop familiarity cues that people look for, that they know that's trustworthy. That also is what counterfeiters are looking for. And you have to compete with counterfeiters on that. So businesses, Australian businesses, either small to medium enterprises or multinationals, have to compete with fraudsters. And it's really important that we actually recognize how to do that. And there's also many different methods about doing that and how to measure that. And we'll go into that in a moment. it's important that you recognize that counterfeiters or food fraud, it exposes consumers either directly or indirectly. So directly is when they are exposed to it, and then there's those that are indirect that are actually just heard about it. Both ways actually damage trust. So let's say, for instance, if I've received a product and I've recognized something's wrong with it, even if I don't know if it's counterfeited or not, but I just don't like the quality of it, and let's say it's a counterfeited product, then I'm directly affected and my trust is damaged. But then I go away and word of mouth, I say that brand, don't buy it. It's not very good. That other people that I've told have not actually directly been interfered with counterfeiting, but they actually now they have heard that, and even that is enough to damage trust of your brand. So word of mouth is extremely important. It's a term in literature, and direct or indirect, we need to try and avoid as much as possible exposure to food fraud. Perceptions have behavioral impact. And so what I mean by that is when people feel that they've been impacted, so directly or indirectly, their perceptions change. And it's really important for us to recognize that there's various levels of counterfeiting, which I'll introduce to you soon, but all of those have different levels of impact to people's perceptions of trust. It's also noteworthy that there's exposure impacts. So in hindsight, so if people have heard, even on the news, that there's a counterfeiting risk, their risk perceptions go up. And I will talk to you about a couple of case studies and some examples, more so in depth tomorrow, but I will go into some examples of what they do today. And even after today, after this workshop, I believe that you will start to have a more heightened sense of counterfeiting, and that will also impact your behaviors of how do you react to that. So awareness is really important in consumer groups, but you can't educate everyone, and that's something we need to, how do we deal with that? How do we not be able to educate our consumers on the risks? Well, we need to learn from the best, and we'll learn from those in a moment. I want to go through some levels of counterfeiting. So John Spink is an excellent researcher who's leading this space, and you can look up his research. He has listed a lot of different types of counterfeiting, and he's gathered lots of samples and identified a number of them. Adulterate is when they have actually taken the product and changed it in some way. So they might water down your honey, or they have actually, it's not a full, complete replacement of your honey product and they're selling something different. They're actually using some of your honey and putting extra water into it, so it actually dilutes it, and then they can get more product. Tamper is when they've actually tampered with the product or the packaging. So you would obviously know that with medicine products, if they have tamper evident packaging, things like that. Sometimes some examples of tamper evidence is often used on wine, because wine is something so easily counterfeited. Wine is grown all over the world, but how do you protect wine from Australia? And that's actually, we're going to learn a lot from that as well. Overrun is when they actually, for instance, Nike, they would get a lot of their shoes made in a particular country, and the country would produce more than what they were asked to do so, and then they would sell more of that. So that wouldn't be a problem for honey producers in Australia, because you're producing the honey in Australia. But if you're outsourcing your packaging designs to another country and you're gathering the packaging, please note that your packaging is almost as equally valuable as your honey product, because that is part of the counterfeiting risk. Diversion. Diversion is when you're sending your product overseas, and sometimes there's a syndicate of criminals within the supply chain the supply chain that you've built. And then they will actually start to go, okay, well, you're sending us, 10,000 units, whatever it might be. Obviously, it might be much larger, but 10,000 units, but we're going to take 1,000 units, send it off to a black market and replace it with counterfeit goods. So it looks like the whole package is being delivered, but then 1,000 is actually being sold on the black market, and they take obviously all the profits. There's simulation. Simulation is when you've obviously got a product that looks similar, but it's obviously not the real product. And I'll show you an example of simulation of cherries, where the product, the packaging is pretending to be this company, but it looks nothing like it. But it still can pass off if consumers aren't aware of you, and they don't know of your packaging, and they come across that packaging, then if they haven't checked online, if they haven't checked your website, then they won't know that that's a counterfeit product. Then there's counterfeit, which is actually almost exactly the same product as yours, and they're pretending to be you. They've tried to counterfeit the honey, they've tried to counterfeit the packaging, and they've tried to counterfeit everything, like even your website. So there's many different things we can do about that. But from counterfeiting, and all of these things are all the things that we're talking about today in the strategies, they will address all of those types of counterfeiting. But just mentioning on the counterfeit, this is the hardest one to counteract, because they are really sophisticated counterfeiters. They try to really look at how you do things, and they will look for companies that are doing it easily to copy, and they will try and copy those ones. The ones that are much more harder, you're knocking out the lower end of the counterfeiters, and you're only getting the really sophisticated counterfeiters. So I also want to mention in counterfeiting, there's two types of counterfeiting. There's non-deceptive and deceptive. Non-deceptive is when you are selling watches, fake watches on Silk Street. And I don't know about you, but I lived in China for 5 years, and I did go to Silk Street, and I bought a watch, I bought some jeans, they were all fake, I bought CDs, and then I started to feel really guilty. And it actually made me aware of all the different types of products that are online. You can actually get lots of different products, and when it comes to products that you wear or accessories, it's a no-brainer, no problem, I can do that. I don't feel too guilty. When it comes to, so I know that they're fake and it's non-deceptive, and I become part of the problem because I'm actually supporting that type of industry. Deceptive is when it's a product that you don't know it's counterfeited, and it's quite clear. It's either you know or you don't know. The problem with when you don't know, there's certain things that's just not acceptable to be counterfeit. And that's things like food, medicines, and all types of things that will affect our health, or even our pets' health, or other spaces like that. So there are two types of counterfeiters. There's modifiers, people that modify your product, or there's mimickers, people that will actually try and recreate your product altogether, and they will work separately from you. And they will create their own jurisdiction, meaning they will create a different space where they will operate and you won't be aware of them at all, damaging your trust with consumers. So this looks a bit complex, but just generally, I just wanted to show you that it's important that this is like a conceptual framework. It shows you how to establish initial trust. Initial trust, you need to present enough information to consumers on the far right. If I can see my mouse, oh there, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but initial gathering, information gathering is the first point of contact. You need to present enough information to build trust. And then there's also a reward, which is obviously the reward of receiving your honey, the high quality honey, or there could be other rewards, other incentives to continue buying. They're the two things you need. Then there's the evaluation on the satisfaction of your product. And if it's good, they will have a repeat transaction. However, if they're not satisfied, they'll drop out, which is quite logical. The thing is, fraudsters are competing at this level. They're looking for the information and they're trying to offer rewards as well to continue their organization. So looking at, this is the perpetrator and this is the crime. The perpetrator is only a perpetrator if they've actually committed crimes, but they can also have, they want to actually counterfeit your product, but if they don't do the act, then no crime has been committed. But if they're going to commit it, that's when it happens. So just wanting to know that when the act actually happens, that's when trust is damaged. What we need to do is put things into place to prevent that act from happening at all. And that's really important that we prevent and deter controls on your packaging, and then you will be able to avoid the crime. If the crime happens, then there's other technology that you can detect, which is still important. You need those technologies to detect the crime, but really we need to be leaning on this. So we don't want to have a band-aid, we really want to have a cure. Okay, so we want to start looking at these, but we also need to have these as a secondary measure. So you've got to understand there's a difference between Australian perceptions and other countries. In Australia, we have perceptions of trust, would you believe, of our supply chains. Our processes are very high quality. We have quality checks throughout our supply chains. We have, standards, policies, and it really builds a community where everyone trusts anything that might have Australian made on it. If I see Australian made logo on a product, I believe it's from Australia because of our regulations and processes in place. In other countries, there's a lot of problems happening, and counterfeiting has been hitting consumers. They are aware of it, so they've become forensic scientists almost, as you will. And it's quite surprising. A lot of businesses don't realize that consumers will pay for technologies that are applied and design investments into products that show authenticity. So consumers are looking for information, they're gathering information, they're looking for details, they're looking for discrepancies, they're wanting things to, they're seeing the details and the layers that you're applying to build trust. And that's really important. And there's two things we need to do. We need to try and build trust with our consumers, and we need to deter fraudsters. I'm going to miss this slide because it might be a bit overwhelming, but just generally, if you would like to just have a look, these are the things that we need to focus on. Design, the relevance of the strategies, so what is relevant to you in your industry, so the honey, so making sure it fits your industry. The links, that means awards or links to your websites. And then resistance is aspects that is just hard, sophistication, hard to copy. And then premium, making sure you do it right. Because if you could actually apply all these great things, but if you do it scrappily and you don't do it well, and you don't show us a level of premium, then consumers will pick that up and just think that you're a counterfeit product. Let's briefly look at some research studies. So we did a big research study between Australia and China. As you can understand, the research was looking at those two spaces, but this is still relevant because there's all countries that are being affected by counterfeiting, even Australia now. So this was done in 2019. There was approximately 4,800 Australians and 4,800 Chinese people that responded to this research. And we reviewed lots of different images of food products with their packaging, from everyday products to premium. And we looked at things that were currency technologies. We looked at destructive packaging. So like, as you can understand, with a cork in a wine bottle. We looked at premium graphics and different types of sophistications you can achieve in graphics. We looked at technologies such as QR codes and NFC chips. And we looked at the Australian-made logo. As you can see, Australia doesn't really care too much about all these types of technologies. All they want is Australian-made logo. If you say it's Australian-made, I trust it. I don't need to have all these things. I trust my my country's food that comes from Australia. China, they wanted everything. So except Australian-made logo was not trusted. If you put that on, they were thinking, well, it's most likely counterfeit. They were saying they want types of sophistication like currency notes, destructive packaging, high quality graphics, QR codes. It's not to say they didn't want Australian-made logo. They want to know it's from Australia, but by just putting that on, it's not enough. Another view of that type of information, just presented differently so you can see it. Australia only wanted the Australian-made logo. The Chinese wanted all of them clustered in different formats across wine, coffee and tea, chocolate, dairy, baby formula, vegetables, fruit, grains, meat, and olive oil. The actual wine also included various liquids, so wine, olive oil, and honey. So this was just a summary of the things that we had. We looked at technology, we looked at design, and we looked at various things. So we won't go through them specifically, but there was a range of things. And just to say, we looked at QR codes, we looked at how QR codes were applied, we looked at LCD screens, we looked at NFC chips, augmented reality, even a live cow cam, so to do with dairy products or for the meat industry. Same with bees, you know, looking at what kind of things you could do with your livestock. We also looked at the ways that trays were presented, the imagery that was used, and windows into packaging, understanding the designer label, how you build in the links of the awards that you've won, and where they can find more information. Images of livestock, images of minimal design labels like black and white, and looking at like it's very simple designs. We looked at, again, further windows to compare with others, hard structural packaging. We looked at, you know, even types of promotional events, family photos and provenance imagery. We looked at even unusual packaging shapes. We looked at images of cooked foods and how to cook it, and, you know, relevant information for them, and also premium designs. Ultimately, there was just things that really, you know, for instance, they looked at this particular image and saw a QR code applied, but as you can see, it looks like a QR code that's just stuck on, and there was no further information. It looks like it's just been, you know, produced and put on. But if you put a lot more effort in, the same person was at first saying, I would never use a QR code, and this was in 2019, pre-COVID. So a lot of people are now using QR codes. So that has changed, but it's interesting how you apply your technology is really important. That level of premium and sophistication application of your packaging and labeling is really important. Augmented reality, we were looking at how it was applied here, and the relevance of the information is really important. Just the ingredients shown on the packaging on the burger, they were like, I wouldn't use it. But then you showed it on a packaging of meat and showed them how to cook it on the barbie to the best, you know, at a rare level or a medium level or a various types of cooking. they found that really, really good. And they said I would buy that and use that often. Every time I wanted to cook it, I'd watch that little augmented reality video. So making things meaningful, and then linking things as well. So obviously imagery of awards, linkages of where it's been produced. These are really important, and it builds trust. And this is not just, I mean, we'll get into a lot more of the security pieces with counterfeiting, but this is all very, very relevant because we need to build trust with consumers, and we're competing against counterfeiters that are also doing the same. But by actually giving links to websites, not just your own, but other websites that acknowledge your awards or registration of your company on Australian websites, ASIC, sorry, different areas where you can show that you are a legitimate company in Australia, and making those links is really important. So from this research, we recognized that it's important to there is lots of different types of technologies out there, but you need to work out what's relevant for you in your industry. And we will also go through a bit of a workshop at the end showing what kind of things are available and how you can go through options. Layering is important as well. You can't just pick one technology and think you're done and dusted. It's not a silver bullet system. You have to actually layer your design and your technologies to deal with counterfeiting. Identity links is really important, as I said before, with links with awards, testimonials from consumers, putting them on your website, making sure people, when they get your product, they can scan it, or if they can access a website that actually has an ability to know your product. So and we'll walk through those kind of technologies as well, but not just your website, try and get on other websites as well. That other consumers are forensic scientists, they're looking for that information, especially if they're paying a premium dollar for the Australian honey products. Transparent purpose, they need to know that the information presented, like for instance, augmented reality, you might think, I would never use augmented reality on my honey packaging. Well, actually, I think you might think twice. There is lots of different movements towards this. It is, it may not be well used already, but it is moving towards that. And this Internet of Things connections will allow consumers to have much more transparent look into your business, to understand a lot more information, and you need to make sure that that is meaningful for consumers. And making sure when you apply your technologies, make sure you embed it with design. Make sure it's professional, and hire a designer. Don't just try and do it yourself. Or you are a designer, do it yourself, absolutely. Or if you're a marketer, do it yourself. But make sure that you test it with your consumers before you roll out your products as well. So let's have a little look at counterfeiting, the big problem. So counterfeiting products are increasing risk to consumers' health and safety. The anti-counterfeiting packaging and technology industry is growing exponentially, and you can look at the graph just on the right here. This was just showing from 2014 to 2020 and how far it's come. It's at the time it was 62.5 billion. Was on 2020, but now it's actually expected to reach over $100 billion by 2025. So that's US dollars, by the way. And the market is growing. So Asia Pacific region especially is growing because of the nature of their acceptance and willingness to adopt technologies, and they really enjoy interacting with their products. So there's really an embracing community movement towards looking for advanced technologies on our packaging. And there's many, please just note that there's many out there that are very sustainable and do not hinder recycling. So we'll go through those. Know what is happening. So 1,200 tons of counterfeited products were confiscated in 2014. That's only a small amount, but now we're looking at larger amounts. People getting a lot more sophisticated, as you can see by that Shivel Regal Scotch bottle on the right there. That type of drink, you know, the packaging looks very similar to the original, but if you look closely, there's no embossing. There's no details on that labeling, and the actual tamper evidence seal at the top was very generic, whereas you look at the original, there was a lot more sophistication in the actual original bottle. So you can tell the differences, and the reason why these were confiscated was consumers reported it. And it's really for you as a business, if you're exporting to a different country, you need to have opportunities for consumers to report back to you about counterfeiting risks. That is through your website, a contact, making sure that consumers are aware that it is a risk that is out there on your websites, not to go in saying you are counterfeited, but just giving them an opportunity. If you do spot anything that's unusual, and talking about the sophistication of your packaging and what they can look for that is too hard for counterfeiters to copy, and also a reporting space for consumers to report back to you. The wine industry is affected. You know, they're expected about 20% of wine is counterfeit throughout the world, and so that's growing, and that's a problem. It's a real problem, and they're making a lot of money from the backs of all your hard work and the trust that you've built with consumers. So moving on, counterfeiting is becoming more sophisticated. Why? Because they've got low cost technology available to them. We're trading globally. Also consumers' complicity, their apathy towards counterfeiting. Often in cultures where gifting is the norm, when you meet a new person, you gift. Sometimes if you know that you're not going to know that person for very long, a lot of people will buy counterfeit wine and gift that on. They'll get the kudos for giving a lovely bottle of wine, but the wine is actually just a counterfeit. So consumers can be part of the problem. And expansion of channels and markets, powerful worldwide brands. It's really important that we can learn from worldwide brands, but sometimes they don't want to share that information. So this is really important to connect with people like myself and other people around in this space that can help you understand what you can do. There's also weak national international enforcement, there's high tariffs and taxes, and there's soft policing as perceived as a problem solver. Just to mention the policing, sometimes police will let syndicates and counterfeiters go because it's supporting a poorer community, and they think, well, you know, it's making them some money, I'm going to turn a bit of a blind eye. Sometimes it's also the police are given bribes. So we can't just rely only on people. We have to rely on the sophistication of our packaging and products. So I want you to meet Con, the artist. He wants to make easy money. He wants to work off your back. He has access to sophisticated manufacturing, often in many different countries that produce a lot of products for other countries. And they generally have a mass low-wage labor force. And they do leverage that, and they keep accessing that information and facilities and people. So let's define the problem. So it sounds like it's a no-win situation. Let's just not export. No, not at all. It's a game. It's a game, and you have to compete with counterfeiting and fraudsters. What I know as a designer, I have actually often looked at a product, and in my early days, I had to re-engineer products sometimes. I'd have to look at products and I'd have to go, okay, I have to, you know, use things like 3D scanners to work out the shape of that size of that bottle. I'm going to change it slightly for my design, but I know that I can learn a lot from this existing product. And if I can change it about 10%, I can actually I can put it out there and it's a new design. So designers are really good at counterfeiting. So we obviously have certain resources to do that. And there's certain things that are really, really hard to counterfeit. I'm not saying that I'm a counterfeit person, but as a designer, I have my resources to be able to duplicate something if I need to. Now, I can either extend, and I'm not saying I'm a counterfeiter, but just I'm pretending now to be con. I can either extend the shelf life of a product. So the most simplest thing I could do is take your product and change the expiry date. That's pretty much, I'm not really changing anything. I'm just modifying your product. And we can actually use different aspects to avoid that. Simple little things like imprinting the dates in, pushing them in like a stamp. There's other things where you can't remove it with alcohol. So you need to test those things as well. The next level is reusing your packaging. So let's say in some countries, people might use your product. Sometimes it's a water bottle, a wine, olive oil, honey, and then people will come back to your house and buy the packaging from you again. So they will go ahead and then refill your packaging with their honey and try and sell it again. So that's reuse. And they haven't actually done anything. All they've done is just refilled your product. Copy. They can do very lightweight copying. So they can take photographs of your label. They can scan things. But that's just the top level. So you can use things to avoid that. Re-engineer is when you actually get into a computer and you either use a 3D scanner, or you might actually 3D model the product again to get exactly it right, or you might try and get into Adobe suites and redesign the packaging label so it looks exactly like yours. So that's re-engineer. Corruption is when they steal your product or overrun or rip off, and that's another form of counterfeiting. And then the rip-offs is when they're actually looking at your brand and they actually pretend to be you, but they modify it just enough to get away with it. So as you can see, McDonald's with the M upside down, or the Ben folds instead of Penfolds, and there's lots of those type of examples. They are all still part of counterfeiting. Pardon me. So this is one where it's not trying to be exactly a counterfeiter, but pardon me, it is a counterfeiter, but it's done very poorly. So these are cherries. And at the left, you've got the original packaging from Australia. Reed Fruits was actually producing one of the globally largest cherries in the world. And they prided themselves on these beautiful cherries. And they sold them only within Australia. They weren't selling them to China. And Reed, the company, was actually counterfeited in China, and Reed only found out by a consumer going, "Hey, is this you?" And Reed went, "Hang on, we don't actually sell to China." So then they found out that there was this whole organization trying to be Reed Fruits. So this is what they looked like. They put the fake little kangaroo on the bottom right, and you can see obviously it's nothing like the original. So what do we do about that? Well, can you imagine something, which is right in front of you, that you actually have used for most of your life, which is obviously now almost fading away because we have digital currency and things like that. But how has currency worked? Currency uses many different types of layering technologies and sophisticated details that actually are really hard to copy. They build trust because they're complex, but they're also transparent. You can actually, as a consumer, look at that banknote. You can, check it out. You can have a look at all the different features. You can get on the website and you can play. The website is actually really beautiful. It's interactive. I do encourage you to just go on and have a look at the Australian RBA and have a look at the banknote and the design of it, and you can actually scroll across the features and it highlights them on the design, and it showcases the details. Now, by showing all the details, it doesn't mean counterfeiters can go, oh wow, I know all your secrets. No, they're still too hard to copy, and that's what you need to build. I'm not suggesting you need to put currency on your honey labels, but you can take the learnings from currency and you can take them and build them into your labels. It's also playful, it's beautiful, it's sophisticated, and it's user-centered. So with honey, let's have a quick look at this and then I'll let you have a quick break. Honey has a long shelf life, and that's why, and obviously if you keep it at the right temperature, obviously you don't want to bake it or freeze it, but if it's kept at the right temperature, it has a long shelf life, and so a lot of counterfeiters are looking for that type of product to counterfeit, and a lot of people are seeing that honey has so many health benefits, and it's a great replacement for sugar. It has multiple formats that you can use it in. So it's not just a liquid format. There's all different types of ways you can look at using it. People look at it even as medicinal. So they've looked, some people have actually created tablets of honey, and they treat it like medicine, and they package it like medicine, and you just pop it in and you suck it. It becomes like a little mouthful of honey, but you should take 3 a day. So it's based on the medicinal features. Some actually use the same type of honey in a different format, packaging format, to apply on their face. It's beauty products. So it's not just consuming as an edible product. Think creatively about your products and how you actually can reach multiple different markets. But as you can understand, it is a highly valued product. It can go for a very high dollar, and that's why counterfeiters are going fantastic. And especially exporting honey products from Australia, a lot of the labeling is very simple to copy, and that's why I want to teach you how to do what you can use. So just an example, growing counterfeiting products, an example of it in Chongqing, Hechang district in China. There was 500 grams confiscated, none of it was honey, and 187 milligrams of aluminium residue was found per kilogram in the honey. So it was extremely dangerous to consume, and there was no honey at all. And also, honey packaging is highly adaptive. So don't be limited to your standard packaging, as you can see here. So you can have a really good time looking at different formats. What can we do? Okay, well, let's look. There's overt, covert, there's remote, there's structural, and there's track and trace. And there's always emerging new types of technologies, which I like to keep my finger on the pulse, and I like to keep adding those to my database. But right now, this is a real top level umbrella categories, as you will. Overt is what you can see and interact with as a consumer. Covert is hidden and is more for validation throughout the supply chain. Remote is when you can connect to it, and gain more information, like a QR code and other aspects, but you can actually, or you could actually look for information on other websites. So it's not just your packaging here or the product, but remote. What are we doing remotely? Structural, let's look at the structural packaging, not just the label, the actual structural and what we can do there. And of course, track and trace, everyone thinks that's fantastic. It is, but it's rubbish in, rubbish out. So if you don't invest and keep information up to date, if you don't use the systems, and if you don't employ people to monitor it, then it's not going to be helpful at all. So track and trace is like things like QR codes, NFC chips. There's lots of different aspects, the Internet of Things, connecting your products so that consumers can engage, and you can also monitor where people are actually buying the product and using it. Overt. So just quickly, overt can be things like gradients, would you believe? Simple gradients, more complex gradients, metallic paints, metallic inks, so reflective aspects. These are the things that actually make it hard for someone to copy your label. Custom fonts, try and pick custom fonts. Don't meaning you create the font. Don't actually buy something that someone else can buy as well. Try and create everything in-house, but get a designer to create your own font. And you can even trademark it if you wish. Industry recognized badges and awards. Why are these important? Because it also, these are normally linked to another website, an industry body that's promoting that award or badge. And if you have it on yours, then it links all the products of Australia as well, and it connects us as a brand instead of us just being one. So I know that the University of Western Australia has done some excellent work in this space, and the Honeybee CRC. Imagery, referencing real places. So as you can see with the Edmont honey, this is from New Zealand product. They've actually got their honeybee location next to the mountain of Edmont Mountain, and they've actually drawn it on their website. They've got references to it. It's those type of links where counterfeiters make mistakes and they drop the ball. They don't know the information you have, and even when they're trying to copy it, they make mistakes, and consumers are looking for those mistakes. Unique textures, wipe some of it off, so don't make it absolutely crystal clear so it's easy just to copy and trace. Fade some things off so it looks worn slightly, and also connect things with health benefits. Make sure you have no spelling mistakes, of course, and unique stories with graphics. Make sure everything's really connected on your label, on your website. These are the very light versions of anti-counterfeiting. So when we look at, the wine bottle, the existing label here was just flat, simple. But if we apply, some more details into the label, oops, sorry, my apologies. If you can look at this label, and it has a lot more detail, embossing, it's really difficult to recreate that as a designer. I would have to go and find a pattern that looks like that and then try and create it. It won't look the same. And so if you can actually showcase part of these on your website and saying these are the types of patterns we use, but you have it on, never show it flat, show it bent around so it's really hard to copy. Perforated marks. Also, if they try to steam off your label, it would actually break the label if they tried to take it. So perhaps consider put perforations through your label. A lot of people hate IKEA labels because they rip off and they don't come off in one strip. It's on purpose. They use glues that make it really hard to rip off in the store. Now we're getting into some more things that are aligning to more banknotes. So void panographs have been used over and over again. They've been used on concert tickets, banknotes, checks. They also used on casino chips, various things. So void panographs are not that difficult to make. You can get a designer to create them. They're hidden, often really subtle, and you don't need to write void, but you could actually write something that indicates something meaningful for your consumers, saying that, perhaps check the website. What happens is if I scan it or I take a photo of it, obviously most people would know the void would appear after it's been scanned, and it shows the word void. It's through patterns and the little dots, and when you scan it, scans don't pick up those little dots. They're really fine, and it's the same stuff that they use on banknotes. Things like signatures and fingerprints are really, would you believe, a fingerprint is really hard. So even if you created it and then you put that into your label, as they've done here for the wine, that is really hard for me to go ahead and try, and I can scan it and I can try and put it down, but if it'll look faded and it won't look good if I can't get it really crisp. So look for little details such as that. Unusual shaped bottles, also like watermarks in your paper, in your labels. It's really interesting. If you show that on your website, we use watermarks, look out for them. Guilloche patterns. Guilloche patterns is what you see on banknotes and checks and all those type of things. They are often repeatable patterns that are irregular. And they're asymmetrical, they don't repeat naturally, and if you create it yourself, you can then also trademark it. So if you use fine details that get really close, it becomes a Moira effect when you photocopy it. So if the lines get really close, it starts to blur and you get black bits when you actually scan it, and then the designer or the counterfeiter would have to actually recreate all that. If they're going to have to do that, they're going to start to go, well, I'm going to look at the honey from, I hate to say it, but honey from Singapore, or the honey from Australia, or honey from New Zealand, or honey from Australia. The ones from New Zealand are not using this, and if the ones in Australia are using it, I'm going to try and counterfeit the ones from New Zealand. It's just the way if you can imagine, you have houses on your street. If there's a dog in the yard, if there's warning, we have alarms, we have security built into this house. The thief is not going to go to that house. They're going to go to the next one that doesn't have the dog and doesn't have the security. So just saying, if you add these things, it's deterring, and often, I'm not saying it will totally wipe out counterfeiters. We do work towards that, but with layering and sophistication, micro fonts, things like that, you will actually head in the right direction. There are more sophisticated things like ink changing colors. So these are leucites. They are actually able to be bought and applied on packaging for the food industry. Obviously, it cannot come in contact with the open space of your packaging because of just standards, but it is actually food safe. So as you can see, Coca-Cola's done it when it's really icy cold, the ice appears, and when it gets hotter, or opposite way, sorry, the ice disappears. As you drink this beer, the leaves fall off. So it's interactive for consumers, but it is really hard to copy because it's a real investment. So that's something for you to consider. Same things with, if just applying it, if you press your finger, the heat can actually change the color of the comb of the chicken. All right, so other things that you think, oh, that's just branding, that's just building brand and everything. Actually, it's really important to know that these actually are almost, that they are counterfeiting security. So metallic inks, embossing, holographics, as you can see here, toothpaste is a really highly counterfeited industry. And that's why they apply all the holographic foils and laminates on their boxes. It's not just to get you to go, oh, I like Colgate. It's because they have a real problem with counterfeiting. And so they have structural packaging on the outside that you use once and you throw that packaging away. Normally, they make it so that you have to destroy the box. They don't make it so that it's easily open and close. Better packaging. When you open it, it destroys. We'll get into that as well. But also the Nestle Cafe seal of authenticity. It's got holographic lenses here, as you can see. And as you open it, it rips an unusual shape, so you just can't put it back together. You think that these things are all just to get you to go, oh, I like ice cream. No, all of this holographics printing is really important because especially if you can build your own holographic design and get it made, then you can own that shape, and it's really difficult to copy. So some holographic animation. Covert. Covert is when it's hidden behind or something that consumers can't really interact with, but it's verification for your supply chain, and people can actually interact with it. So as you can see here, we've got images of, UV codes that are actually under labels that can actually shine through the top layer of the label when you shine a UV light through. There's things like down the bottom here, you can see there's actual UV embedded cotton fibers, even in packaging labels, and people can't see it unless they shine a UV light. There is talk about UV light being embedded into phones in the future. They aren't there yet, but that will be an interesting feature that you can also embed for consumer interaction. But at the moment, it's only for COVID uses. There's also data dots, which you can actually get your logo or your name printed on tiny, like micro printed on tiny dots of aluminium, which are then put into like if you can imagine a hairspray spray can. And I'm not saying it's that size, but it's built for industry, and you can build it onto the end of your production line. And as your products are flying through fast moving consumer good industry, it sprays those data dots on, and using high strength microscopes, you can see them. So you could actually indicate to consumers that they're there, so they could actually look at it, but it really needs a real high definition microscope. So it's more about supply chain validation and to make sure that the products being sold over here are actually yours. There's puff tags. Obviously, we're familiar with QR codes, but there's also a new technology coming out where they're spraying UV activated inks, splattering it onto the QR code, and it makes every QR code a unique QR code. And as the product zooms through, there's a camera that takes a rapid shot of that product and logs it into a database, and it's making a database of all products. So when someone scans that, they know that product is activated, and so that's the QR code piece. But if someone's trying to copy your QR code and it's being sold over there, you can go to that space, get a copy of their product, and scan that puff code, and you can see whether it's legitimate or not. Okay, so then there's also RFID tags and taggants, which I think most of people are aware of how they operate. They're normally hidden behind the label, but there's lots of different options, and there's now sustainable ones printed. So they're 3D printed and they come as a sticker. They can be applied to your packaging roll, so lots of different types of avenues are available in that space. And then there's options where if you'd like to, you can actually buy your own color. And the idea is that you spray this ink that only shines a certain color onto your products. And then retail are provided a little window. It's developed by Fujifilm, and your suppliers can actually have the little window, and consumers can go into the store to buy your product, and they show it over there, and it lines up to the color. So it's actually the ink activates the color while the window goes over it, and you can show that that's your color, and you can go online to check that color is registered as your business. It's an interesting concept. It is commercially available through Fujifilms. Remote. So there's NFC chips, which are really quite advanced now. They've really taken leaps and bounds, and a lot of consumers are getting very familiar with how to use them. So obviously many people know about them, but just to quickly, for those that may not have a great awareness of them, NFC chips are normally a small chip that is activated. The power is absorbed by the phone or the device that's held over the top of the NFC chip. So it draws power from it and it's activated. And it sends information to the phone, similar to like a website, but it actually provides information to an app. You can scan the product when it's in a certain area, so it's geo-located. So you can scan it while it's in store, and it'll show you all the information about, should I buy it? You know, what's the incentives to buy it? Once you've purchased it and gone out of the store, the NFC chip will be changed. So it knows that it's outside of the store, and if you scan it again, that information that it's displaying to consumers will actually be changed, and then it will actually tell you about what to pair it with food-wise, or you know, how long you should open it for to get the right smells out of the bottle. So with that said, it's just saying it can move. You can actually designate the information displayed, so you get repeat usage and engagement with consumers, and that obviously increases a lot of sophistication. It's very hard to duplicate the counterfeiters. Now, as you can see, it's even applied to simple things like, you know, down the bottom, sorry, it's covered up, but it's actually just a milk drink, and they're using NFC chips built into the packaging. So it's just embedded into the packaging, a Tetra Pak built into the back, and then and it's all recyclable. It just gets chewed up in with the Tetra Pak. There's also NFC chips that come as stickers. Just be careful of these. Obviously, you can go ahead and do those, and they're great for retrofitting, but I wouldn't rely on them for too long. I would try and embed your NFC chips into your packaging labeling over time. You can start with these, but just be mindful that counterfeiters can lift them off with sophisticated ways like steaming and whatnot. And then once they've got it off, then they can either use it on another packaging. So it's a lot of effort, but they do go to that effort. So it's okay to use these, but this would be in your phase 1, phase 2 level. And then when you grow, and we'll talk about this later, but as you grow in risk and grow in consumer demand, you will want to move to more sophisticated embedding chips. QR codes, we're very familiar with them, but you can also play with them. You can shape them and change the design on the outside around them, perhaps like the bunny rabbit or the fingerprint. Just build in more sophistication. It doesn't mean that it has to be, it doesn't have to be a square. Change it up a little bit. And Result Groups of companies, a company in Melbourne that actually does a lot of that type of work. They offer a lot of QR codes and different avenues in that space. This is also emerging technology, which is being used for, obviously, Aquador is a water bottle producer company. And it's, instead of a QR code, they register the actual design of the packaging as the QR code. So there's no QR code. Consumers can scan the bottle, and that then activates the website, or whichever, it directs the consumer to where you want them to go. So there's no QR code. The actual packaging design becomes the QR code. So you have to submit the graphics of your packaging, either front, side, back. You can do multiple levels. So you can do the front and then side, and you can have multiple things. And consumers can scan each side and get different information. It's offered by MyPack, Catchroom, and Slice. There's lots of different avenues, but it's really nice, and it's photo recognition software that's actually been adopted and is growing by Amazon. Amazon uses it. You can actually use it now. You can download the Amazon app, and then you can scan someone's shirt or scan something, and it will make recommendations of products and where you can buy them. So also QR codes that offer codes inside them. So here, DuPont Eyes On, it's a holographic image, and as you bend it around, you can see that it has 3 dots at the top. See up here? And if you bend it down, you can see it'll show you perhaps 4 dots. So, and you can bend it to the left and see that it has 1 dot, and bend it to the right, and it's just a hologram. And so you can register a code with them. They'll build you the hologram and send it to you, and you can apply that as well. So, and then consumers will then, you know, when they go to scan perhaps a QR code, the QR code will then ask for a code to enter, and you can look at the hologram on the product. and you enter the code, and then that will match up. It's a secondary layer of sophistication. Who doesn't love a scratchy? Why do scratchies have that grey gooby stuff on the top that you scratch off? Well, it's a form of destructive packaging, and so you can also leverage that as well. So if there's some sort of QR code, you can put that second layer as a different way. It's similar to this. So you scan the QR code, it'll ask you for a security code, you scratch off the scratchy covering, you enter the code, and by scratching it off, it means you can't use that packaging again. And there's just different layers. Structural. So this is the fun part, because I absolutely love structural, being an industrial designer. Destructive packaging is really important, and however you do it, you can get creative, you can go to town. There's different ways about it. Some people actually have perforated or kind of origami bent packaging, and it wraps around their product. Then they take a photo of that product and send it. So when we're talking about real premium service, sometimes you might be sending individual items off to individual people, depends. But if you're going to offer that service, obviously that's very labor intensive, and that is something that you would build into your costs. But this is what we're talking about, $100 bottles of honey, because of the service and the guarantee of the authenticity. So things like the shoes in the top left. The top left is the shoes. You think, oh, that's just a cool packaging. Actually, it's really difficult to get those shoes out, and they did it on purpose. They sewed the shoes into the packaging, and you have to rip the packaging off, which it does rip easily. It's not very hard, but it's enough to protect the shoes. But when the consumer gets it, they rip it off, and it destroys the packaging, meaning that no one can reuse that again. And again, things like, tape, like holographic tape, can work so much. But see, as I just want to point this one out, is that yes, it's destructive. As you pull it off, it leaves little bits of silver foil, and it shows that there was a tape there. So it indicates it's destructive. It shows that it has been used before. This one I love. I absolutely love this one. It's very applicable to your industry. And here is Smirnoff vodka, and they played with this shrink wrap over their product. Obviously, it has various flavors of, I think lemon or orange or passion fruit, sorry, strawberry and lime. And as you can see, the skins, you peel off. They've perforated the shrink wrap around in a spiral, and you can peel the outer layer off. That is another form of destructive packaging. And what's beautiful about it is you can change that outer layer graphics often, and not change your whole product packaging at all. So that type of level is offering you that flexibility on the outside. It's very cost effective change of your SKUs, and it's something that you could think about adopting. Okay, so obviously there's track and trace, and we're looking at QR codes and authenticity checks. There's lots of them out there. Pretty much most people understand how they work. Consumers can download an app, or they can scan a QR code, which will take you to a website. QR codes are more efficient because people don't really like to download apps these days. But apps can offer another layer of authenticity. So if you want to go with that, you can look at GS1. They have obviously partnered with Authenticate IT. And there's various services out there, but ultimately you might think, well, I don't want something that has an app. Well, when you're talking about high risk countries that have lots of counterfeiting happening, they're looking for multiple layers, whereas just don't think that just as what Australia does is the same as everywhere else. It's not the same. So do check with your consumers. Perhaps the consumers you're targeting may not want an app, but I do encourage you to consider that secondary layer. Know how to prepare. So there's no silver bullet for counterfeiting. It's really a matter of putting a business process in place with measures that help protect the brand and the consumer. Okay, I'm just looking at the time. I know that we're going to be moving on soon, so I'll just finish off this little bit and then we'll have a break, and then we'll move on to what kind of options you can use. So just know that your business is going to grow as you get more popular with consumers, as you keep producing trustworthy and authentic products, and as you grow, counterfeiters are watching you, and they're starting to see that you're growing in, you're gaining market share, and they're going, well, fantastic, we're going to look at your product and your packaging, and we're going to try and do the same, but we're not going to try and work in where you're working, because they don't want to get detected. So they're not going to try and, well, sometimes they do. It does happen where counterfeiters try and put their products in with you, but it's quickly found. Whereas often counterfeiters are operating in a separate jurisdiction. And that's why you need to link consumers with information to know what to look for. And that's often through your website, through remote access, through information that you prepare, and creating ways that you can get consumers to quickly connect from your packaging to that website and to other websites that link to your business. What's important is that there's 4 quadrants. You can either have weak detection or weak. So basically, if you haven't got much applied, let's say you've got just a nice little label on your packaging, and it has a simple little screw top, it's standard packaging, and there's nothing that has applied so that you can't figure out if someone's counterfeiting your product. So there's no detection piece, and there's no deterrence either. There's the label is simple and clean, so it's very weak in deterrence and weak in detection. So you would be extremely vulnerable, and counterfeiters will be looking for you. If we look at strong detection and weak deterrence, strong detection means like you might have an NFC chip and or a QR code, and so people are buying your product and counterfeiters are pretending to be you, and then you find out someone's copied your QR code and they're selling your QR code and your product over there, and you detect it. Okay, so you've detected it, but now the crime is done and your trust has been damaged with consumers. So it's strong detection, you picked it up, fantastic, but you haven't applied weak deterrence. So outside jurisdictions, unprotected. So this is still a problem. If you have weak detection and strong deterrence, meaning that you're trying to deter the counterfeiters with sophisticated layering and, like, using the learnings from currencies and banknotes and casino chips, whatnot, but you don't have something like a QR code or something that you can check in and make sure that it's, you can detect people counterfeiting your product, then that can be a problem as well, because you're deterring them. But if they do get through that deterrence, if they're sophisticated enough to copy it still, you're not going to detect it. Obviously, what we need to do is have strong deterrence and strong detection. And you need to apply phases of growth. So you need to work out what you can do today. Okay, you need to work out what you can do in the immediate future. So what you can do, retrofit your existing products. You might have products sitting there in your supply chain right at the start, you're about to sell them. Is there something you can apply right now? And we'll look at those. Is there then later on, as you grow and build and there's more risk to mitigate, well, you'll need to have a secondary phase. And then as you grow again, you will have to invest in people and invest in the things like the designers and the marketers in your business that can actually build more sophisticated layers, and investing in technologies that you can apply to your packaging supply chain. So right now you need to start simple. Just start small, because if we don't start at all, we're going to damage Australian premium brand. We all need to start. but it can be simply through design. Design can be the first thing. And simple things like, you know, shrink wraps and other things, but you do need to work towards investments, putting money aside and investing in much more sophisticated technologies along the way. So there's lots of avenues, and we won't go into them yet. We're going to have a quick break, and then you work out how you're going to apply them over time, and work out, you know, roughly when you're going to apply them. There's many suppliers, and I have lots of suppliers that I offer through my website. It's free. Go ahead and look at them. I'm going to be adding them to that site so that they can actually, you know, who to go to find out more information about those particular suppliers. So the point of my research was to help small to medium enterprises and Australian businesses get abroad. That is my incentive. I really want to see that happening. And the suppliers, you can choose. You need to work out what's good for your business, and the actual next day we'll go through a lot more detail. But ultimately, you have to look for high security. You need to find out ways to make it hard to forge, hard to replicate. Easy visual judgment for consumers. If there's things that they can engage with, please make sure that they see it, they pick it up, that it's not hidden from them. Make it crystal clear, and find ways that you can actually also engage with your packaging. Verification with a simple tool, you know, that's like more the covert pieces. You know, looking at digital, you know, ways of validating your packaging, not just on the primary packaging, but the secondary packaging and the tertiary packaging. Looking at ways of quickly working out if it's being counterfeited or overrun. Weight of your product is really a good one as well. Just letting you know weight. So obviously a lot of different types of sophisticated product supply chains now offer wands, and they scan a whole shipment, a crate of boxes in one go, and they weigh your product to the very tight degrees, and then they work out how many kilograms or weight it is that the boxes are. And if it's not exactly that when it gets to the destination, they'll do a statistical sample of different types of the packaging to make sure that it's all legit and it's authentic. And that's where you need to make sure that verification with a simple tool is available. Relabeling or repackaging prevention. So just things like destructive packaging, making sure your glues really don't just come off easily, that people can't wipe off your your expiry dates. Making things dynamic, that's normally with changing of your design or applying technologies that can easily be applied and change information to consumers. But stay informed about anti-counterfeiting, because there's lots of technologies that are available all the time, and there's new research coming out. So be in touch with that. So let's take a break. I know I've been talking for a really long time, and then we'll go through Ideate, which will be a whole range of strategies that you can work with. And then what we'll do is there's a lot more interaction happening in the second day, where you will actually get onto a platform and have a play. So right now, have a quick break of let's say 10 minutes, and I'll get back to you. All right, well, we'll keep on going. And just quickly, as you can understand, I worked for Mondelez and was part of the innovation team to also develop lots of different types of the chocolates, as we all like to indulge in occasionally. And what's really important about these just couple of little slides is to show how they've innovated without losing the integrity of their brand. And that's probably important as well, because I'm asking you to try and be dynamic and try and come up with design changes often, and you're like, well, no, that's costly, that's time consuming, and perhaps we might even lose the brand essence. But big businesses are doing this all the time, and this is really important, that when you're actually looking at changing your brand, you need to identify what elements make you who you are. So over time, you don't lose that too quickly. And it's mainly to do with the types of language used, the fonts used, colors. It's really the cues, the familiarity cues, and that's the piece that we also harping on about with building trust. So Cadbury, as you can imagine, has been around for a very long time, and I won't even try and claim to know how long that has been, but I should know that. But as you can see in the far right, that's one of the oldest Cadbury graphics, and they started off with just a solid print of Cadbury, the logo, and dairy milk has always been kind of in a script format. So they've maintained that throughout. It has that dairy milk has always been flowing. It has evolved over time, the dairy milk. So they tried to merge it in the far left, which was the secondary one. And obviously there's many iterations, but just showing you the ones where there's real change. But the one on the left shows it still looks like a bit of a swish, a flag, whatever you want to call it, but it still reflects back to what they established right from the beginning, and they didn't lose that. The Cadbury logo, they really did a significant jump at that point, and they changed their brand logo, and they added that swirl script font. But they've carried that through. So when you make a significant change, you don't want to change that particular item too often. You want to keep that going throughout. But if you're going to make a major change, make sure that you bring consumers along on that journey. So maintain certain things that you have had in the past, even if you do change the brand logo or fonts or anything like that. Just make sure you bring across, things that are familiar. So in the past, it was that purple and gold. They have addressed that slightly and made it more polished and more metallic-like as they've gone more modern nowadays, and we were part of the actual development of that packaging that actually reseals. So that's really interesting. Also, just looking at the product itself, I know that you're honey, and a lot of products you think, well, honey, it's liquid, why would I be looking at chocolate? But you'll be quite surprised at just the innovation piece that you can actually do with moving honey into more of a different format. You can also partner with different types of offerings as well. You could be, honey in medicinal things, like, as I said before, like tablets, or honey in, beauty products, or even honey in like partnered ice cream offerings, or honey in various things. So it becomes another product that is more solid that you can work with. And here at Cadbury, they actually were looking at the chocolate pips, which are the things that you break off, their portion sizes, and those actually changed. They could change those almost every year, slightly, and so they would actually announce, there's actually a bit of a platform where they announce what type of shape they're creating, and it will be released at a certain time. They would only do that just before it would release, but consumers would follow along and know that those avid consumers. And the thing is, we think, oh, do we really have those avid consumers? Probably not so much. Maybe those that want to follow chocolate in Australia, but that type of forensic looking for changes in a product is quite often and normal in other countries. So especially in particular the research that I showed earlier. So weight change, the pip formats, all those type of things, even your product. The second, see how they've got multiple layers around the chocolate. There's the chocolate product itself. There's also the actual stamping of the brand into the chocolate form. There's the actual alfoil layer, and then there's the outer primary packaging. And then they move to structural packaging shapes like that to the right. So layering lots of different ways consumers can unpack and unbox your product is also something that is not only a delighter, but it's also anti-counterfeiting strategy. Just here, just showing casing like the different shapes that have been evolved over time, but just moving into that more sophisticated space. Down the bottom, the packaging reseals until the food is totally consumed, but then people often recycle that material as well. So that's once it goes into recycling, it's often not got picked out of for counterfeiting. So that's something to be mindful as well. All right, so the ideate piece, I'm going to talk to you about the cards, which are called trump cards. These are like a summary of all the things I've just been presenting to you. So you're going, oh, I'm overwhelmed, there's too much to know. And you probably think, oh, maybe you really understand it all and really really advanced and an expert in this space, which is great. But these type of this resource is available at testimonial.org. You can jump on and you can look at these cards. But what I'm going to do for you is that there's these cards and they summarize each strategy that I've presented to you. And then over here, it gives you a bit of a thumbnail of what it is and what it does. It has a label so you can keep track of which one you're referring to. If you're talking to people like stakeholders within your business, you can say, oh, A1. And it has the actual name of the strategy and what it does. So it reveals validation. Here it also shows you a very high level cost factor. So compared across all the types of strategies that I've shown you, we have grouped them, clustered them through the University of Melbourne, and we looked at the ones that are really quite easy to apply and they're cost effective, and that's green. Ones that are more harder to apply, a little bit just the secondary level, to more difficult to apply or a little bit more expensive to invest in. And the red one is more you really need to change. Probably if you haven't got it in place, you'll have to invest quite a bit of money to invest it into your supply chain, and because it involves in education of your stakeholders within your supply chain, and also getting them to buy in and make sure that they align to the processes. So the red really requires a lot more work. But you could almost treat these things as almost, if you're looking at your phases, you want to group your greens in the early stages, your yellows further on when you've got more money to spend, and then red is when you're really working towards a multinational business, and your business structure is much more open to hiring more people to manage these technologies. And down the bottom, you can see there's reuse, copier, re-engineer, corruption, and rip-offs. They're the counterfeiters' capabilities. And what this particular card is strong in deterring copier and re-engineer. So I've got approximately 30 plus of these cards, and they all do different things. So obviously down the bottom, you can cluster them, and as you will, that's why I called them trump cards, not because of Donald Trump, but they're actually looking at how you can bundle them like a playing card to act as a suite of cards to like a trick and to trump counterfeiters. So play on words. So prototyping and testing, just to showcase you what we've done previously in these workshops with other companies. So they work with these cards, they bundle them together, they work out what things could work for them. So they first looked through all of the options and went, okay, absolutely not. And they discard the cards that they think is just not relevant for their industry. It's not discarding ones that they just don't want to do today. If they're going to think about, I could do that, maybe when I'm a multinational or something like that, you keep those. But anything that you just say, nah, I would never touch that, you discard those. So that's one. Number two, you then start to look and you assess the cards you've got based on how easy it is to apply today to later. And then number three, you bundle them into meaningful options. And then you make sure that they knock out the counterfeiters' capabilities, as you can see here. So we've worked with a whole bunch of companies. So this is one example, and they're happy for us to show you this. So New Lax was actually counterfeited, and it's a laxative Australian laxative product, all natural fruits, basically dried fruits. And most of you might have actually used it before. And when I went over to Hong Kong, I saw it on the shelves and they were counterfeits. That was about 5 or 10 years ago. Then we did this workshop and they are so excited to have done this with us. They have given us lots of feedback saying we've just worked with the options that you've provided us. It worked with us. We design things in-house now. We layer things, and now we've actually keep assessing the areas that have shown where things are counterfeited. We look around and we just haven't picked up on any new counterfeiting syndicates of our product, which is really exciting. And they have lots of different SKUs. That particular product is open to various packaging formats and product formats. And so they've really adopted lots of different learnings that I've presented here. So I just did a rough sketch for them showing all the different options they could do. And look, just to note, sorry, it's a bit messy, sorry, the formatting's gone wrong, but basically, you know, there's the remote piece, there's the outer packaging, there's the inner packaging, there's, you know, and when, for instance, honey, you can still have structural packaging on the outside of your jars. You might think it's excessive, but it sometimes just is necessary because it's those additional layers you can apply those different types of technologies. So this is all going to be recorded, and I'll happily answer any questions at the end as well. But the ultimate goal is to have strong deterrence and strong detection and knock out those counterfeiters. All right, so we've already discussed these, but these are the trump cards, which and I've got a platform which I'll introduce briefly. But so this one is the void pantograph. I've already talked about that one, and it obviously covers copier and re-engineer. We've got batch numbers, which are really interesting because batch numbers, you can actually cut out certain batch numbers. You can have, like, let's say 1, 2, 3 batch number broken, and then 8, 9, 10. Not that you do it at that small scale, but if you break out batch numbers, then and you connect those batch numbers to, for instance, QR codes, like, or whatever, or even if they're just batch numbers, if you start to find some product being sold that's the batch numbers within the broken areas, that's also another simple way of detecting if something's gone a bit haywire somewhere else. Signatures, fingerprints, and textures and embossing. Don't underestimate these simple little things. They're like a dog out the front of your house, or they're like security systems out the front of your house saying, don't come here. It's just saying, I'm harder to copy. So do use those little things. And of perforations will, so as you can see here, I've just made a note for this one particular. I said add perforations to avoid the reuse. So this technique doesn't knock out reuse, but if you bundle it with perforations or across markings, or a tear opening, so to damage the packaging, you'll knock out reuse. So that's what you got to look. You got to look to bundle them. So this one here is recognizable, unique packaging. So it brings a delighter for consumers, which is fun. Not saying that you have to do this, but you know, when you think about honey, you could think about medicinal avenues as well. It doesn't have to be just something for consumption, but it again knocks out those two. So here, why do you think medicine has a breakable seal? You think that it's just for freshness? No, it's also for destructive packaging. And just here, this is a bit of a fun thing. You know, they've put cows and whatnot, or pigs and fish and turkeys. But ultimately, that whole packaging, when you bust it through that foil, it's destructive packaging and it's counterfeiting. Again, the shape of your product could be different shapes. And that can also be really helpful if you can create a custom shape of your product. I understand your honey, but if you reduced it down to something like almost a boiled lolly, that's something you could consider as well. Again, imprints not only in your packaging but in your product. Some of these might not be applicable if you're not going to go to a different format of your product, so you can discard the card. But if you think that, okay, maybe it's just opened up a different idea for us on how we're going to sell our honey, and you know, perhaps we could partner with Cadbury or partner with things, just think about, you know, if you're going to change the format of your product, then just be mindful these are still techniques you can be using. And again, you can patent that brand obviously into the chocolate, that imprinted chocolate. I've left something on there, but basically you can imprint and stamp shapes into labels, and this would be really applicable for you know, the date labeling, making sure that your date labeling can't just rub off. So don't just look at the picture and say, what, that looks like a tanning of leather. No, think creatively, and you need to try and think about the learnings of these and how it can apply to your industry. So then there's non-repeating tessellation patterns, chair substitution tiling. So these are types of patterns that don't repeat. So they're either circular or they change, swirl, or even they're computational produced. So to the left there, that's actually a mathematical formula to create that pattern. And then once it's created, you can actually trademark the mathematical formula, which is really quite cool. So you could say that mathematical formula for a pattern is our pattern, and that's what we use, and that can be also part of your security, or you can then chase counterfeiters if you want to go there. But look for patterns that, like, just look for patterns that are hard to copy. Don't just put squares. You know, if I get into my computer and I look at your packaging label and I'm looking at it going, oh wow, that's just so easy, you know, I'm going to counterfeit you. Whereas if it's something like this, I'd be like, oh, I'll find another honey, I'll look for something else. This one's similar to the shrink wrap, but this is more so that you can produce different formats of your packaging in various ways really cheaply. So shrink wrap is a really effective way of varying your packaging sleeves and creating complexity as well. So you can actually showcase a lot of different types of products, or even pair up with designers as well. And designers can then verify on their site, look, we've designed for this company, and, you know, maybe even win awards, design awards. It doesn't have to be food oriented awards. It could be the pattern, or it could be Aboriginal, First Nations people's patterns and storytelling, and applied to your packaging and partnering with them, getting the artists to show their work. Watermarks and reflective white inks. So please be mindful that you could actually use these in your labels, and if you indicate it on your website, people can look at that. Fine micro prints, they are very effective, but they're hard to achieve, so you do need to use very fine printing to achieve them. So if they are hard to forge, but they are something that banknotes use often. And thick inks, you know, raised thick inks, that is something that could be investigated for your premium products. It's not for everyday honey, but it's something that, you know, if you're looking to export Australian honey, we want to make sure that it looks premium and it feels premium. It has texture on the top, so that's really tricky to copy. There's OVI, optically variable inks. They actually shift color as you move the packaging around, and it is actually used on multiple food packaging. It is a little bit more expensive, and again, it's still available at the green level, but it's something that you would have to invest in for that particular labeling. You'd have to look for the supplier to actually apply that to your packaging. So it's a little bit unique. You'd have to go out of your way to get that. Covert tag inks and readers for product tracking and validation. So this is something for detection piece. It's covert, it's hidden. And here is an example of it by Sun Chemical, where they've printed a label onto the packaging, and you can scan it. So it's not applied, like it's not a sticker or anything. It's actually printed with the printing label, so they can offer that service. Invisible inks, we've talked about. It shows up when you shine a UV light. There's visible, invisible fibers, we've talked about as well. But be mindful of what it knocks out. Thermochromic inks, Nescafe Classics, we've already talked about as well. Toothpaste examples, but this is about branded holographic stickers, foils or codes, and laminates as well. Smart, unique QR codes and serials with, for instance, they connect to your location. That's really helpful, but also be mindful of just playing with the shape as well. And covert ultra high frequency RFID chips, which is really good if they're high ultra frequency, because if you have them located in your box and you have a number of honey products in that box for a particular supplier or company or consumer, sorry, you don't have to open the box. You can scan the box on the outside and it'll go through that thick cardboard. You can actually get high frequency RFID chips just for, even your tertiary packaging as well. So NFC chips we've already talked about in depth. There's printed memory sensing wireless labels. And there's also things like the destructive scratch label, like scratchies. And I've already talked about these. So you can see these are a really summary of everything. Now, so anti-counterfeiting is more than technology, and you need to work out how you're going to present yourself as a dynamic company. You can't just create one particular packaging design and stay there. It has to be innovating often, and you have to work out how to do that for yourself and what that means for you. But you need to engage with your consumers, and you also test your products with consumers. They are key to overcoming this risk. If you can build connections with your consumers, then you can overcome the risks out there. So communication, transparency on multiple levels that build trust and securing the consumer's best interests. So that's that. I'm going to now, if there's any particular questions on that, there's a lot there, but you're welcome to think and hold your questions for tomorrow as well if you'd like, but there's lots of questions. But what I would like to do is just talk about what tomorrow is as well. And tomorrow we'll be introducing Miro board, and we actually play with the cards and how you can bundle them for yourself. Is there any particular questions at all that you'd like to bring up now? Otherwise, I'm happy for you to think about them for tomorrow. I'll start bringing up the Miro board just to show you. Maybe some might come up.
Hi everyone, it's Jürgen here. I'm one of the organizing team. If anyone does have any questions and you wanted to say that, you can enable your camera and your microphone, and if that doesn't work for you, please feel free to submit your question in the chat box. Just make sure that you select everyone in that blue drop-down menu in the chat box so that Caroline and everyone else can see it. Otherwise, only us organizers will see your question. Okay, thanks so much.
No worries. I'm just going to, there's a chat function. Great. I'm just going to, while anything does pop up, and that's okay if there's a lot there to digest and it's all recorded so you can go back. Now, I just thought I'd take my time, go through all of that so we can get that out of the way, and you guys can use that as a resource for yourselves, which will be shared with you. So you can jump through and re-watch me again and again if you wish. So I'm just going to share my screen once again, and please stop me if you have questions anytime.
Caroline, I do have a question. So
Yeah.
is that okay?
Yeah, please do.
Thank you so much for this very informative workshop. I was wondering, because I do like cards and board games, I was wondering whether those letters that you had with numbers, they mean anything, or were they purely at random, or there is some also logic there? So the further down the alphabet you go, the less conducive it is to counterfeiting. Is there logic between the letters that are on the cards, or it's completely random?
It is completely random, but they are going from A to Z, and then they repeat again. So A to Z with number a number after them. So it's A1, A2, B1, C1. They did start off with probably the lighter versions of the strategies, so easier to apply. So we were working through the database. So yes, there probably is a natural progression of complexity as they go along. I know that the last one I think was that I showed you was applied LED lights, and I think that's really quite a significant investment, and it's more of a marketing ploy, and you'd only do a short run, but it's still relevant and it's still part of the bundling. And so what the purpose of those trump cards are is that they are a summary of what is existing currently commercially, and you just need to kind of create, put a creative thinking hat on when you're looking at them. Don't be restricted to the actual the designs that I've shown there. It's the strategy, and that's the point of this research. It was trying to empower businesses so that they can actually bundle things to suit their needs, because at the moment a lot of and hats off to suppliers, service suppliers out there that are offering one technology, and they do promote saying it's going to fix your counterfeiting needs. And I beg to differ, because it's by the research, it shows people are willing to spend more on counterfeiting, anti-counterfeiting strategies. People are looking for those trust familiarity cues, and we really need to be mindful of that investment is building brand trust, not only protecting. So yeah, I mean, those numbers absolutely are just kind of more a reference, but I do think that as we expand them, perhaps it might change, but I don't want to change the system too much, because as I expand, I want people to be able to know and keep with the system that they already have. Great question though. So
Caroline,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt. Just before you go ahead, we also have a question here from Donald. So Donald, if you can hear us, please unmute your microphone and feel free to ask.
Good, thank you, Caroline. I'm just getting out of the horse and cart era into motor cars, so it might be a bit of a dumb question. But in B-QUAL and B-Trace, we supply our members with a logo, which might say accredited beekeeper or something along those lines. Could we supply a label with that logo and an NFC or QR code attached to it? And could the member, if they wanted to, then code that NFC or that QR code themselves, or does it have to be done before you print the NFC label?
So you've got your brand and you've got that registered with B-QUAL, is that right?
Yes, B-QUAL is the auditing company. Yeah, so we supply labels to those members who have passed the audit, which gives them accreditation that they can use the logo and show their honey has been produced at a higher standards.
Yeah, wonderful.
But if with an NFC card tag, does that have to be coded before it's printed, or can it be done after?
No, totally after. Basically, it's a pointing agent. So if you can imagine, when you scan the NFC, like you apply the NFC chip to your packaging, but you have, once you've got them all ready, they are linking towards a particular area, and you can change that information at any time. That's the good thing about NFC chips. QR codes are kind of stagnant. They're kind of focusing on one area. NFC chips can look at multiple layers of information, and you can update that information at any time. You can even communicate with your consumers. We're going to launch a certain promotional event at this date, on
yes.
You could change the information. So you don't have to have it all pre-programmed while you print it. It's just more, you can program it at any time. Post print.
A lot of our members are only quite small packers and operators. Yep. Is it expensive for them to put that information into an NFC code?
NFC chips are a little bit more costly, but it might add an extra $1, like really $1 per jar. They are coming down. They're trying to get them further down. The more expensive ones are sustainable, meaning that they don't interfere with recycling. They are printed and they are normally offered as a sticker. Those particular ones there's a number of suppliers, which what I'll do is after this workshop, I will send to B-QUAL a list of all the suppliers that I have, with all the different types of offerings that they have, and especially QR codes and NFC chips in particular, where they are and who contacts and things like that. I think that'll be really valuable for you guys.
It would be, because we would supply our members with the NFC tag, and they would just have to then put in whatever information they wanted. So yes, I'd like to follow it through a bit further with you if it's a possibility that we could give our members. Thank you.
My pleasure, Donald. Yeah, thank you for the question. Please interrupt. I'm just filling in time. If you want to please just interrupt. So I'm just going to keep going with this. I'll just move this over. So before you is the Miro board that I'll introduce to you soon for tomorrow's workshop. And as you can see, it's an interactive board. And if I zoom in here, what I want to show you is that everything is locked. You can't move anything that you shouldn't move. So don't fear, when you can actually have a look at these later. But I'm mindful it's 4:30, so we are still got an hour left, but I would like to try and finish a little early for you, because I know it was a long presentation today. But the instructions here, so your left mouse button is to select things and your right mouse button is to move. So right mouse, if I'm using my right mouse, it means I can move things around. Left means I can select things. You won't have access to all this, but just saying that you can select things, so like that, and then move that if you needed to. But anything that you shouldn't move is locked down. And then to scroll is your middle mouse button here, so move in and out. And so if you want to copy and paste, you can do Control-C, Control-V. So click on the item you want, and then so select it first, Control-C, Control-V, and that will copy it. Or you could just double click the item, and then a little button like this will appear, and you click on that and it'll duplicate the item. Now you're wondering, what are we doing here? So let's have a little look. And please tell me if this is, to see this, okay. So here, what we'll be doing tomorrow is looking at all those trump cards that I just ran through with you. I normally do this physically, so converting this to online was a very fun event. I have run it online before, but it's more tricky with larger amounts of people. But so here is the information about the trump cards. And I can zoom right in, so everything, give it time and it'll refresh. There's the counterfeiter's capabilities and all the information that's there. And then also, so as it's obviously refreshing, the instructions card, and it shows you what things are actually labeled onto there. So obviously once it refreshes, and the purpose of the trump cards. Now, obviously you can see that there's the whole bunch of trump cards that are available. And what I'm going to ask you to do is over here is a map, a target almost, and you've got the easy circle, you've got the medium circle, the difficult circle, and the very difficult circle. And then there's less relevant and more relevant. And what you need to do is go through each card and think about it for your business and move it to where you want it to be. So if this is really easy, but it's less relevant, then put it over this side. If it's more relevant and easy, you put it over this side. And then you might start to plot these and go, oh, that's pretty easy, I can do that. That's easy to do. That one's a bit more harder. This one's a bit, yeah, it's medium, it's not too bad. And so you just go forward and start plotting these. Once you've done all of those, you might want to start duplicating these little stars over here, and you can then copy those and work out which ones are really relevant for you today and start putting those on there. Now, I'll just zoom out again. What I want to do is also step you through this second phase. Once you've got an understanding of which ones work for you as a company, you can then, move up here and you can grab the ones that are on this side and you can copy and paste. So you keep a copy on your little board, move these ones down, and you take the more relevant ones down here to work with. And then you start to go, okay, well, what kind of things can they do? So let me zoom right into this one. It says copier and re-engineer. So maybe I might just, I want to knock out these counterfeiters. So I'll copy and paste that. Copier and engineer. And then that one I know is about the same. Copy and paste, and so forth. So you need to figure out the ones that are relevant to you, but then also start to go, okay, well, okay, I'm just plotting them now here. This is just by eye. So once I get a few more in there, I'd have to go, okay, I need to get another one to knock out the rip-offs. And you start to go, okay, well, great, I'll take that, bundle that one, that one's the same, so it knocks out that one. I'll take this one, and then probably another one that does the rip off, and I can bundle that together and say, okay, well, that is an option, but it doesn't mean you have to rely on that. You can then go ahead and do another lot and do different variations and create different bundles. The purpose of that is to start to work out, right, okay, this is my, copy that, take my little bundle and pop it down in my, bundle the trump cards, I put them together and start to go, okay, there's my little bundle. And we'll unlock this one. Copy that, bring them down. Now we just got to make sure that they are high trust and high security. Remember, we've got to deter and we've got to detect. And so there's that piece, but we also need to build trust and security. So having a look at these, you need to start to go, okay, is this just for consumers? Great. Well, that will be high trust, but is it actually high security? And you have a look, okay, it breaks as destructive packaging, so it's not too bad. It adds a bit of thing. This one here, it's you know, it's more about consumer valid. Sorry, move in for you. This one's about, you know, fingerprinting and signatures. I might start to see that, yeah, it has a bit of security, but it's more of just a label piece, and it's good, but it's not as strong in security. So you just make sure that nothing is just only high trust only and low added security. You need to make sure that things are either here, here, and here together. Obviously, none of them that I've selected are low added trust or low added security. All of them add some level of trust or some security. So that's void. But you should have a range of products that strategies that branch. Either all of them fall in here, that'd be perfect. But if you feel that they're just spanning here, make sure that this side is covered and this side is covered as well. And finally, you plan it based on today and tomorrow. So obviously you'll have to redo this again and again as you grow. This is not something that you can plan for 10 years time, but this is something like just roughly what can you do today, and what things can you apply. So for instance, perhaps you might want to do, you know, obviously if it's relevant to you, you might want to start to go, well, okay, that shrink wrapping was such a great idea. Perhaps we could start doing shrink wrapping, or maybe that's just for a little bit later. Maybe that's my phase 2. So even though it's close to today, it's still in my phase 2 space. But phase 1, I really want just something I can stick on the existing products. Maybe I could buy some hologram stickers I can just buy them and stick them onto my existing product range that I have already. So I just buy some stickers, and that's at least a start. So you can buy reams and reams of holographic, but just try and be mindful if you buy something from a off the shelf, so can counterfeiters. So just, there's no point in buying something that's not made perhaps in Australia, or so try not to buy things from other countries that have high counterfeiting risks, because normally the manufacturers of those anti-counterfeiting strategies can probably be selling it to someone else as well. So looking for Australia-made technologies and strategies, or designing in-house. So just be mindful. Just having a look at this. So the 4 things that I'm asking you to do, sorry if I can try and zoom in a bit for you, is first you sort your trump cards and what will keep in your hand. So you've got to work out what you want to discard, like a game, and what you're going to keep. You can always revisit this and rethink it when you change your business plan as you expand. And these will grow and change, and to keep your eye on what else you can add to these trump cards. But basically, you look at what is relevant for you today and sort them, and then you bundle your trump cards to beat your counterfeiters' capabilities. Make sure you cross them all out. So all of those guys need to be crossed out eventually with bundles. So you need to bundle more than one bundle. Try and get a whole, like maybe 4 or 5 bundles options, and then you can still work with those. You still can, you know, decide what pieces go where, but you need to work out how much you want to invest in as well. And then invest in trust and security. Make sure you recognize that it is an investment. It is not just an expense. It's not an outgoing cost. It is actually building into your business something that your consumers will value. And it's been proven through research. And then build a phase plan. So make sure you don't just leave it there, like up here, oh great, I've got some strategies, I'll apply it whenever. No, make sure you plan it so it's achievable for your business, it's meaningful for your consumers, and that everything is ready for today and then tomorrow. So do keep it in your business planning model. So that is, I'm not going to let you do it today. What we'll do is I just want to give you the overview today. It's been a lot presented. I'm going to let you digest that. But what we'll do is I'll share the link with you tomorrow morning, and you can have some time going through that, and I'll spend time helping you with it. But if you want to do it, you can also do this after the workshop. It will be available to you. This template has been saved to the this platform is called Miro, and they have another platform called Miroverse, and people can publish templates on that. It's like an open source platform. It's called Miroverse, like universe, and you can go into there and search for this template. So please just maybe take a break today. Don't try and do it tonight. And we can have a look at it tomorrow in a bit more detail. Tomorrow, so just in summary, I'd like to tomorrow take you through a little bit about some examples of wine and olive oil and honey and a few other things just generally. It won't take a lot of time. And then we'll also spend a bit of time on this interactive piece as well. So that's pretty much for today. Is there any other further questions that anyone would like to raise? More than happy for you to send me an email as well if you have questions that are a bit more sensitive, because obviously all our businesses have IP and different ways of working. So feel free to send me emails. I'm more than happy to respond to those too. But that's pretty much the summary of today's workshop, and tomorrow, remembering that we'll have a lot more interaction. So I do appreciate your time going through all that information. Hopefully it wasn't too much.
Doesn't look like we have any further chat comments or questions there, Caroline. Thank you so much for joining us today and for this fascinating presentation.
Okay.
Unless there's anyone else, we can then probably end the call here and yeah, get processing on the recording.
Perfect. Lovely. Thank you so much for having me, everyone. And we'll see you tomorrow at the same time, 2:30.